And we're back with a quick tutorial on Rimworld. And today we're going to be looking at these lovely stats over here. Namely, how do you get pawns with good ones? Now this question occurred to me because I want someone with construction right now. And I've only got two decent constructors and I'm like, who is the best side to attack to get those? If you look on the world map, when you start off the game at first, you will have a few enemies already built in. Usually two tribal sides. There's these ones down here, the green ones, and then these enemies over here you get in the carrot settlement or these advanced city tribes. And you also get the pirates. Which ones would we get the best pawns out of if we're looking for someone who's good at construction or even medical or plants, all the way along those lines? So I ran a bunch of tests. Don't worry too much. This is fairly straightforward. All we did to obtain this data is we say got the tribal savages. We spawned in about 500 of them, and then we counted up all the tribal savages that had a shooting skill of 8 or higher. Now, we could have looked at other things like burning passions and all that thing, but this was actually a really good meter stick from what I was able to tell, so we just went with that as well because it was simpler. So you'll notice that the tribal savages here, out of every 1,000 tribes person, you will face 185 that have a shooting skill of 8 or better. However, their melee skill tops out at 329 per 1,000, which that's a lot of melee skill going on. And there seems to be a sort of consistent pattern here. For example, shooting skill is a little bit stronger among the pirates, but the pirates' melee skill is a lot weaker. And then the enemy cities, as in the enemy cities you'll face off with when you first start off, their shooting and melee skills are much lower than both the pirates and the tribals. But this seems to translate, well, further down the line. You'll notice here, actually, a simpler way to think of it is let's look at points per side. What this is an average of all the skills that are higher, 8 or higher amongst every pawn that showed up. So, for example, for the pirates here, if 1,000 pirates showed up at your doorstep, on average, there would be 1,491 skill points that would be 8 points or higher on all of those pirates. And what you'll notice here is it's actually really consistent across all of them, from tribal savages, pirates, enemy city, even the friendly city. I did a quick test on them as well to make sure it worked out. And friendly cities and enemy cities, they almost have identical profiles. So we're just going to leave those out for the rest of this. Now, if you go back here to this graph, you'll notice the enemy cities here, they have very weak shooting and melee. But this skill shows up further down in the more soft skills like intellectual, social, medical, artistic, even animals. So if you're looking for someone who's good at intellectual or any of those skills, usually you will find them more commonly among enemy city types. Whereas if you're looking for, well, plants, tribal savages sort of have that covered. Tribal savages have the best planters of all of them. It's actually kind of impressive how consistent it was across all the testing. Pirates actually have the best mining of all of them. I don't know why, but that's just the way it turned out. And tribals, they have the worst social skills of anyone. Just the absolute worst. Their social skills are terrible. It must be from all the chopping people's hearts out and eating them or sacrificing them or whatever it is. God knows why. This, of course, is just a good meter stick, but let's have a look at the total averages. As in, if we add all of these up and average them for everything, assuming you get attacked by all three equally, which I know it's not really realistic. The enemy cities don't attack you nearly as much as they should. But if you look at the total averages here, you notice one big outlier, construction here. Construction is really weak. It barely shows up at all. That's crazy. It's super weak. Now, I don't want to get too much more in depth into this because I do think that when it comes to this, the enemy cities one I should probably exclude from the data. We'll do that later on. It's just enemy cities, they rarely attack you, so you're far less likely to end up capturing pawns from them. You're far more likely to get trapped by tribal savages and pirates. They're pretty much your bread and butter for recruitment purposes. But let's compare all of this to the Empire. Now, the Empire is one thing that people suggest, go and attack them and have great pawns. No, do not attack the Empire. Do not get in any fights with the Empire. The problem is they have massive shooting skill. Massive. And their melee. Like they dwarf both the pirates and the tribals. They just smash them to bits. However, that translates in them just sucking at everything else. The thing is, they have a points per side as well, sort of similar to this. They're a little bit better. We'll cover that later. But it does mean that they pretty much suck at everything. I mean, I think there's only one thing they're halfway decent at, and that's medical. On medical, they beat out both the pirates and the tribals, but they're not even close to the enemy cities. You're better off picking fights with the enemy cities than picking a fight with the Empire. Great fighters, terrible at everything else. Also, good thing to note, when I was doing this testing and spawning max size raids on the test map, I would get about 90 pirates showing up per raid. But for max points, I'd get 100 of the Empire showing up per raid. Meaning, if you annoy the Empire, they will show up in larger numbers than pirates or enemy cities. They will have better equipment. They will have better shooting and melee skills. they will have charge rifles, they will have cataphract armor, they will have all of that. Plus, they've got built-in death acidifiers, meaning all of their equipment will be destroyed on death, making them the worst side to get into a tangle with. The only thing you're going to get out of it is good shooters and good melee, which you can get that in other ways. That's not nearly as important. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the Ancients, the ones you can find in Ancient Dangers and, in caskets around the place. These ones are actually pretty interesting. They're a little bit more even-keeled than the other ones, as in their shooting and melee is not quite as good as Pirates and Tribals, but they're a little bit better than the cities. However, they're pretty much average all the way across the board. Now, if we look at a points per side listing, as in how much skill points they get, they actually come out ahead. Though, this is Tribals, Pirates, Enemies, and Friendly Cities. All of these are pretty much about equal. Ancients are a little bit better than all of them, and then the Empire comes out way ahead. However, the Empire, of course, all of that way aheadness is just dedicated towards shooting and melee, none of it in any other skills at all. Ancients are much more well balanced, and in my opinion, yeah, if you're looking for pretty much a decent pawn at anything, in fact, they're the highest ones in construction, which we'll get back to that. Anyway, one last average I wanted to go over was Tribes and Pirates. The Tribes and Pirates are the ones you're going to face the most. So this is probably what your averages for finding decent pawns early on is going to look like if you're not busy raiding tombs. So assuming you just stick to Pirates and Tribals, your construction is going to be severely lacking. Now, I'm not saying you can't find some, it's just on all of my playthroughs I've always found that construction has been the one thing I've been lacking the most. And it really does make an awful lot of sense, considering how infrequent it is, being the least common skill of all of them. At the same time, just say medical. Medical here shows up, it's quite low as well. It's not really much better than construction. However, if you have one good doctor, you're usually fine. Keep a backup doctor as well, just in case the actual doctor gets injured, and you're pretty good. One cook, you're fine. Probably, they can support about 15, 20 pawns on one cook. Crafting, one good crafter, and they can craft you loads of really good stuff. You don't even need them to be crafting all the time. But construction? You constantly need construction, and it's not just for crafting good beds and good chairs, good dining tables, all that. You also want to construct walls, floors. You're probably going to want a wall in your whole base at some point. You're going to want to construct a kill box. You're going to be placing down thousands of stone bricks as the game goes on. It's a colony builder game, and building is the least common trait. And imagine you had 15 pawns and you have one cook. You're fine. And you have one constructor, you're going to be in so much trouble. Expansion's going to take forever. Every time you get hit by a raid, the repair costs alone, or the repair time, no. For that reason, if you take nothing from any of these graphs, if you see someone who's good at construction, grab them if you can. If you've got your hands on a psychic shock lance, don't go for someone who's got 10 great traits in something. If it's not construction, go for those constructors. 4 or 5 good constructors will allow you to expand rapidly. 4 or 5 good crafters, yeah, you only really need one. One good crafter, one good artist, 1 or 2 people who are good at animals, one good person at plants. Pretty much on all of these fronts, you can get by with one good person on all of these. But for construction, it's the only trait from the start of the game to the end of the game. The more of them you have, the better. If you could have half your team being good constructors, then you can flash build construction projects or repair stuff. And even when those constructors are not busy, you can have them smash up rocks or do whatever. But construction is the one skill I would say, look out for it more than any of the others. Dedicate more of your time and effort to acquiring them and be willing to put up with more from them. If they've got a drug addiction, so what? They can get over the drug addiction. Maybe they're abrasive. Who cares? Maybe they do questionable things with animals. Whatever, in their spare time, so long as it doesn't interfere with the construction. One last graph just to cover the best and worst of all the sides. So the worst shooters and melee, it's enemy cities. Enemy cities are just the worst at it. The Empire come out ahead, no surprise there. However, worst constructors, enemy cities. Best constructors, Ancients. Now, there may be a little bit of room for error here. Remember, there's only a 500 pawn test size, so there's a little bit of room for wiggle room here. Pirates are the best miners by a decent margin. Empire, of course, the worst because they're the worst at a lot of things. Pirates are the best cooks, but only barely. I don't get why that's a thing. Maybe it's all the sea shanties and the rum. Best planters, tribal savages. They are way ahead of everyone else. And the Empire are the worst. Literally, out of over 500 Empire troops, not one of them had a plant skill above 6. Not one. They no green thumbs present at all in the Empire. Same thing, animals. Best ones are the enemy cities. Worst are Empire. Don't know. Well, okay. The enemy cities I don't really get. I thought the tribals would be better at it, but what do you know? Best crafting, tribal savages. Did not see that coming. Worst crafting, pirates. I suppose because they steal everything, they don't have to craft it. Artistic, ancients come out just ahead of the actual enemy cities, and worst is the Empire because they suck, of course. Best medical is the enemy city. Worst medical, tribal savages. Sort of expected that. Best social, enemy cities. Worst social, tribal savages. No surprises there. And finally, intellectual. The enemy cities come out miles ahead of everyone else. The worst, the Empire. How the Empire are the dumbest and yet have the best tech, I have no idea. I mean, seriously, the Empire are the dumbest. They also have the worst animal traits, the worst at plants. They're also the worst at mining. How are they still around? I don't get it. Never mind. In this current playthrough I'm doing, I was hiring every single pawn that showed up, regardless of stats. Now, a bunch of them were taken out of tombs, unfortunately, so it's going to mess with the numbers a bit. But you will notice that construction is still quite low down on the list. We need 2 people with any passion for it. And this person here, I think, started with about 6 in construction, and they've slowly ground it up just from, let's just say, construction is very hard to get your hands on, and trying to do any large construction projects is very difficult. So, yes, keep an eye out for constructors. Everything else we're swimming in, mining, even cooking, plants, animals, crafting, artistic, social, even medical, we've got multiple people. In fact, we've got 2 prisoners already here, and they've got medical on both of them. Also animals on one of those. So plants, medical, social, intellectual, animals and medical. Just all over the shop, but construction, really difficult to acquire. I'm definitely going to prioritize that in all future playthroughs. Now, do remember, with all of that out of the way, these are only generalizations. We can't perfectly predict what everyone's going to be like. For example, Nagir is an ancient, and they've got plants, medical, social, intellectual. Their highest skills are social, well, melee, social, intellectual. Okay, so actually they're unfortunately a bit of a bad example. They're actually pretty close. This one here has, melee, which is, yeah, melee is their highest trait, but they don't have any social or intellectual, so, and they have animals and medical instead. Right, but, okay, my point being, you can still find good people in sides that would not normally have it. So you might find someone who's really good at shooting or melee with these people, even though they might not have it naturally by default. However, there are a few things you should really take away from this. One is construction, keep an eye out for it, and 2, don't annoy the Empire. The Empire have the worst troops. Unless you're looking for people who are just killers, that's fine. At the same time, they're going to have those death acidifiers in them, which, yeah, you can't remove those. I would probably avoid annoying the Empire because the rewards are just not there. There's actually only negatives for attacking the Empire. Anyway, I'll cut this out here. I hope this was at least mildly informative for you, and good luck.